What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our Showdown live stream for round 2 of the Truist Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for all your Showdown lineups with a look at the weather report, any questions you've got for me down there in the live chat. We'll talk some strategy, some ownership, as well as lineup construction, and also some contests available over there in DraftKings, as well as some player pool stuff as well. So over this video, you're pretty much gonna get all the information that you need for the slate, but anything else that you're curious about, or maybe that you want to add on top of it process-wise, just feel free to go ahead and let me know. But we got Steven down there in the chat, also Alan as well. I appreciate the kind words, by the way, Alan. It's a whole lot of fun to be covering golf out here. We got Sice Ross down there as well. And yeah, we got a lot to talk about here. So we'll go through all those things that we just mentioned. We have a question about the golf course. Is the reason against older courses -9? Pretty much, right? Brookline was easy when you didn't have a lot of weather out there either. But let's wait one more day before we condemn the golf course, because I think the weather is going to be a little bit of more of a factor out there for round 2. So we'll go back to that after the next round. So hello to round 2 and hello to me, good sir. Click that like button. Yeah, amen to that. Smash a like button if you guys haven't already hit it. Ugh. Rough start to the live stream here. My mouth's a little dry. Let's get a sip of water and refresh that. We got Gang Green down there as well. Hit that first round leader on Mitchell you did today. That's pretty awesome, man. I didn't see your slip quite yet. I'm sure you posted on over in the other site. Hopefully you hit for a good number over there. That'd be pretty sweet. He was like 50-1, I thought. You got Darren down there. And then, yeah, Ross mentioning that Denny was putting really good. It's Denny McCarthy, though. So what do we expect, right? The world's best putter. I'd expect him to putt that well pretty often. But let's talk about this golf course. So it played even easier than what I thought it would play today. I thought it would play like a -2 scoring average, partially because I wanted to be conservative about my projection. Right? If I had told you I thought it had played -3, right, you would have told me I was crazy over there yesterday. You had some people saying they thought it was like a US Open golf course, and that obviously is not the case. You had multiple -7 or better rounds. In fact, you had 6 or better on the day, and -6 or better rounds, you had 10 of those rounds, and that's just out of 72 players. So in terms of guys over par, it was only a handful, 5 that had that distinction. A Bridgman, Hadwin, Michael Kim, Glover, and Dunlop. Dunlop, not so surprising with the kind of off the tee play that we've seen, but you really had to play poorly to go out there and shoot over par. So this kind of golf course could get a little bit different with the colder temperatures tomorrow. Also a little bit more wind than what we had out there today, but it's going to be easy no matter what. You know, that kind of wind might make it play closer to a stroke and a half, maybe 2 strokes under par, but you're not talking about this golf course playing over par. This is going to be one of the easiest golf courses that they've played for the entire year. Mostly because of the receptiveness of the golf course, but also it is the 4th shortest course that they're playing on the PGA Tour schedule. Southwind, Pebble Beach, and then one other golf course is shorter than what you're going to have this week. And when you have wedges in hand, those soft greens, as we've already talked about, you're going to see the kind of scoring that we had for round 1. So not such a surprise that it's playing under par. I guess the real surprise was how much under par we saw it playing out there for today. Tomorrow, though, going to be slightly harder conditions. And because of that, they've moved up some of the tee times. So over here on this other tab, you can see the first tee time is at 8 a.m. as opposed to about 11 like you had for round number 1. And your last tee time still only about 2 hours later at about 10 a.m. Eastern time. So still only a 2-hour spread from the first to the last tee time. Also still going off of holes 1 in 10 on threesomes off of both sides, which is going to really diminish any sort of weather edge that we have. But it is important to note that they're trying to get out there early so that they can finish up play, because what you'll see with this HRRR forecast is that they're calling for an extremely sloppy day. Rain early in the day, especially about 6-7 a.m., over a ½ an inch that is expected to come down. And this HRRR forecast has a slightly different timing with the weather than some of the other models that you've seen out there. But at some point tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of moisture that comes through the area that is likely going to halt play when it gets really nasty out there, and could have an hour or so delay as they dry up the golf course. So that's why they moved up the tee times. They want to make sure they can get all of round 2 in if they have any sort of delay. And they don't really know when that delay is going to happen. It could happen before play. They might have to delay the start of round number 2. It could happen a half an hour into play. delay when the conditions get too sloppy. They go out there and continue play, or it could be an afternoon delay and maybe they get everything in before the really heavy stuff comes through. It's hard to say because as you'll see with some of these other models, it's a lot more sporadic. In fact, this HR DPS model, which is another one of the 5 or 6 that we have at our disposal, has most of that weather coming in the afternoon. This NEM model also favoring the afternoon a little bit more. Meteo Blue is calling for also a lot of those in the afternoon, more so thunderstorms like you can see in that model there. And because a lot of them are telling us different things, like this Icon model looks a lot more like what we had for the HRRR, it could just be an absolute shit show. So I'm kind of glad that they're going with this consolidated set of tee times, where it's only 2 hours from the first to the last one, because I think trying to guess any sort of an edge out there for tomorrow, even if you had them split in 2 sums off of hole number 1, would I think be nearly impossible. You'd have to go out there, try and guess it, maybe just stack both sides and hope that you end up getting it correct. This kind of slate, though, where it is set up in those 3 sums, we don't have to worry about it nearly as much. You can go out there, kind of ignore the weather out there in your lineups, but it is worth noting from the scoring perspective that I don't think you're going to see a -3 scoring average. The winds are a little bit more significant over here on the HRRR, as you can see, especially the gusts towards the second half of the day. They get up to close to 20, 25 miles an hour at times out there in the PM. That could really have an impact on play if they have a delay and have to finish up in the afternoon. And even if they don't delay, let's say that it's just rain that comes through and they have to play through that rain tomorrow. Well, that would be even worse out there for your scoring conditions. If they have to delay play and play in some winds, I think it'll play like maybe a stroke harder than what you had for today. But if they have to play through wind and rain over there tomorrow morning, it could play tough out there. And tough for this course might be like a stroke under par or something like that, but that's 2 strokes harder than what you had for round number 1. So I don't really think it changes the skill set that we're looking for. Round 2 showdown, we want some ball striking poppers. If it's soft greens, you want guys that can go out there and throw darts. Short game regression candidates, I always want guys that are due to make a few more putts. Course history guys aren't a thing around this kind of golf course. High upside players, though, are always what we're looking for in showdown. When we're playing a showdown format, and it's all about the birdie production that you're posting, the streaks, your raw scoring over there on DraftKings is all that drives your showdown exposure. You want to go after those high upside birdie makers. So for tomorrow, I don't think that changes, and that's the main thing I'm leaning into, is building a solid player pool, trying to get some leverage out there into my lineups. We're mostly going to focus on the player pool next, so we're going to go through some of the shots gained metrics and how I use those to my advantage. But the game theory, we're really going to talk about when we get to the lineup construction later. But between building a good player pool, going out there and using game theory when you're actually putting together lineups, that's all you need for a solid showdown portfolio. And I'm not saying that you're going to profit every single slate, that you go out there and you lay that foundation. But if you go out there and you run your fundamentals, which is building a player pool where you have reasons for being on people, playing game theory edge wherever you can out there in showdown, especially in showdown where it's only an 18-hole sample size. It's not like an entire event where you have 4 full rounds to go out there and work with. There's even more variance when we just have those 18 holes. Embrace that over there for your process. So we're going to touch on the player pool first, and then some of that game theory stuff afterwards. Where we leave off, 45-1. Good stuff on that, dude. That is a heck of a first round leader bet. So hopefully it got you a few $100s there. PCC is getting nuked this week. It's unfortunate that the weather's making it so easy, because I think if it was firmer and faster, it would be a little bit of a different story. Akshay shot 63 with 3 bogeys. Yeah, he did, man. There were some crazy rounds out there. If you were making less than 4 or 5 birdies today, you were losing to the field. Birdie average was 5.07 per round. I had to run those averages for my prop stuff. And I think it'll go down a little bit tomorrow. But yeah, end of the week, if you're not sitting around 18 to 20 birdies, you're going to getting lapped out there. Dunlop still found a way to get DFL. Yeah, he's been sitting in that position for a month or so at this point. He said you love your commitment to getting that every first round. Yeah, he tends to bounce back out there in rounds 2 and 3, though. So we'll see if he continues that trend lately. Killer Keith has the personality of an untipped waiter. He does, doesn't he? Huh? Gets kind of frazzled out there at times too. Hope that there's a Rita's ice cart on the course. You mean like the Italian ice stuff? Is that what you're talking about, Joseph? Yeah, because it's gonna be cold tomorrow, so I don't know if tomorrow is the best day for Italian ice. Maybe you're talking about something else, though. I don't know. How can Spieth coming off round 4 stink it up so bad? It's golf. It's an 18-hole sample size. I just mentioned that you only have 18 holes to work with. crazy stuff is always going to happen. In fact, if you're surprised what happens over an 18-hole round of golf, then, I would say, why are you surprised? If you've been following golf long enough, you know that crazy stuff happens. That's why, right? If you thought that Jordan Spieth was 100% going to go out there and nuke today, then you haven't played golf or haven't followed golf long enough. It's a crazy sport. It's a 4-letter word for a reason. That's normally what I like to say to my buddies. Rory McIlroy, for example, he looked like he was on top of the world heading into this week. He had just a slightly above average round today, right? Like even that was a little bit surprising for me, but it's golf. Crap happens. That's the answer for it. It's golf. Crap happens. He said, "You're the best, brother. Thanks for the props." Of course, Nicholas, I appreciate you. And yeah, good prop day for sure. I know we're talking about DFS here, but props have me hyped for sure. Ended up hitting at an 80% clip today, which gives you a bunch of units, especially when you went as heavy as I did. I knew it was going to play easy. Again, not quite as easy as what it ended up playing, but took advantage of that for sure. And can we get a deep dive on Cheesesteak and Novak? Yeah, before we go through the field and some of the shots gained metrics for ball striking, let's look at Novak first. So today, gained on approach, gained around the green, and then lost off the tee with the putter. That's about as average a stat profile as what you're going to see. I like the fact that he gained on approach, but losing off the tee is not great. And then with the short game categories, he gained around the green, which might be a little bit lucky, but it was only a stroke there, so whatever. And then he lost strokes with the putter, which I would say I'm okay with him losing strokes with the putter. He's maybe even due for some regression over there in that category. The ball striking, though, was just maybe above average. So yeah, a 5.5, a 6 out of 10 out there on the shots gained metrics. But Novak, with the form that he has heading into this event, I don't think is out of play at all, especially with the kind of course fit that he has here. I really like the irons and the putter for him, but the putter just needs to come around. It wasn't there today. And then Tom Hoge, this one, he lost 2 strokes putting, was a lot better on approach, so 1.6 strokes into the positive over there in that category. But just like Novak, lost strokes off the tee. So both of those guys are going to have to figure out a way to be better off the tee, especially with the rain tomorrow. That rough is going to be even more penal than what it was for today. So if your guys like Hoge, Novak were only hitting like 40, maybe 50% of their fairways, and they're not bombers like you have with these two, today you could get away with it. You still had guys shooting like -3, -4, going out there and doing that. Tomorrow, I don't think that's going to be the case. So I know I mentioned before, like the skill set wasn't going to change that much. Now that I'm thinking through it, I haven't built my player pool yet. So I still have time to go out there and mold my process a bit. I'm thinking off the tee matters a little bit more tomorrow because if you're hitting it in that rough, you're going to have a hard time going out there and hitting it close because you have wet rough that's 3.5 inches long. It plays like 4 or 5 inches long because it's extra dense. So guys like Novak, Hoge, for sure going to have to turn it around off the tee. But the approach play and the putter regression, I think that's a positive for both of those two players as well. And they were okay with the irons. So like above average plays, I would say. And so that helps. Thanks, of course. Let's go through some shots gained metrics. So I want to go through the field, and my usual starting place is always shots gained ball striking. And these guys at the tippy top are going to get some extra steam. Keith Mitchell, no crap, is going to get some steam because he's over there at -9. First round leaders, again, adding probably an extra 3 to 5% ownership right there. But even your Sepp Straka's, your JT Postons of the world are going to get clicks from people that are doing their research. And it's not everyone that's going out there and looking at shots gained metrics. A lot of people are just entering lineups on the toilet and kind of degenning it over there in the middle of the night. But where I really like to go to for these ball striking stats are the slightly sneakier options. So for example, a Keegan Bradley, who's still shot -6, he'll get some steam because of that score, but he's a little bit further down the board here. And if you can find your Daniel Bergers of the world, who gained over 2 strokes ball striking, but lost a bunch of strokes putting, these sort of players are the ones that I'll be taking out there in my player pool because he won't be as popular as some of the other guys towards the top end of this list. Like these other guys in the top 10, they're all going to get clicked. Justin Thomas as well, coming in off the win. He's also going to get clicked out there in a bunch of lineups. The first guy here that I could see being averaged maybe to below average ownership would be your Daniel Bergers. And the ball striking stats are the most consistent part of golf out there from round to round. If you've been here on the channel before, you've heard me say that a million times at this point. But if you're new to golf, the reason why we say that is that your golf swing from day to day is a lot more more consistent than the breaks that you get with your short game. And if you play golf, that is probably very obvious to you. Sounds like I'm probably making it too easy if you go out there and you play a lot of golf, but a lot of people that play PGA DFS maybe are newer to the sport or maybe haven't even played the sport at all. What I will tell you, and this has been back tested 1,000 times before, this is not conjecture over here with what I'm about to say, the two short game categories around the green and the putter are the most volatile that you have out there in tour. And it's not like they're a little bit more volatile than the off the tee and approach stats. They are orders of magnitude more different, or more volatile out there from round to round. Your error bars, your standard deviations out there with those two categories leave you a lot more wiggle room than what you have in the other two categories. And the reason for that, especially if you've played golf, you would know this, you can hit a perfect putt and it won't go in the hole. It'll hit a spike mark. It'll hit just an imperfection out there on the green that makes the ball not go in. And sometimes, it's not all the times, sometimes guys are just putting terribly. Their setup is wrong, their stroke is incorrect, whatever the case may be, there's an actual reason for them not making putts. But you hear it all the time from these players after their rounds. Oh, I just didn't get anything out of my rounds. Oh, I was hitting good putts and they just weren't going in. They don't just say that. Like, if you've played golf before, you know this is true, that there's a lot of truth to what those players are saying out there. And, you know, I've back tested it a bunch of times before. We've gone on the channel before here and showed you a bunch of examples of that short game regression happening. The ball striking categories, though, approach play and off the tee play, there's still a lot of variance out there in those categories, but they are far more consistent. And it's why we want to go out there and lean on those. Now, you're not the only one who knows that. This is, like I said, it's not conjecture. This is a well-established tenet out there in betting, betting on golf, whether you're playing PGA DFS on golf. This is something that's been established for quite some time. So a lot of people out there know that. That's why I like to go down to these Daniel Bergers as opposed to those top few players, because these top few guys are going to get clicked by a whole bunch of people. Like, they're going to be 5, maybe even 10% higher owned than some of the other guys around them. Whereas the sneakier guys could really give you some leverage out there in those contests. So Corey Connors would be another one. He had a really good ball striking day, about two strokes gained over there in the ball striking stats, but lost nearly 2 strokes out there short game. So, you know, I look to him for some regression. In Austin Eckroat, he's got to clean it up off the tee a little bit, but his approach play was excellent. Nearly 2.5 strokes gained over there with the irons, but he gave it all away out there on the green. So not all of these guys are going to bounce back and have a big day, but out of Eckroat, a Corey Connors, some of these other guys that we talked about, who was the first one? Berger, maybe even a Justin Thomas, right? He lost his 1.6 strokes over there with the putter. Of those 3-4 guys, 1 or 2 of them is going to go out there and have a really good day. And if they go out there and they gain 2 strokes putting and they continue to go out there and ball strike it like they did, well, that's how you end up having a nutted round. And a nutted round around this golf course was like 4, maybe 5 shots gained to the field. And what you'll see with these ball striking guys over here, like a JT, is he gained 2.5 strokes ball striking. If he goes from losing 1.5 strokes putting to gaining 1.5, that's a 3-stroke difference, and that's 5.5 shots gained right there. Somebody down here like a Daniel Berger goes from, you know, 2 shots gained to ball striking. Let's say he's even just a neutral putting tomorrow. That's 5.5 shots gained to the field right there, right? That's how drastic some of these swings can be out there from round to round, and why I'm looking for some of those ball strikers. Like a Corey Connors, for example, you know, he's just under 2 shots gained over there with the ball striking. If he's even just a neutral over there at the a short game tomorrow, you know, that could be just under 4 shots gained to the field. So those sort of players are the ones that are kind of showing up the first in my process. And guys like Sam Burns, he hit the ball well today. A Ben Griffin was also doing very well out there with the ball striking. I could tell you from following Russell Henley today that it doesn't look like he lost a whole bunch of strokes putting, but if you go hole by hole with Russell Henley, he had a stretch of 4 holes starting on his backside today where he missed 4 straight putts from less than 10 feet for birdie. He had a bunch of misses from like 5 to 7 feet out there from birdie today. So though he had a bogey-free round with 5 birdies out there, really solid production, he could have easily been -8 out there. So, you know, he's another one of those players that I will definitely be going out there and throwing into a few lineups. Who else really checks the box from the regression standpoint? Like, those are mostly the guys I wanted to point out. I guess a Ben Griffin, we pointed him out already too. Patrick Cantlay, solid from tee to green, but lost a few strokes over there with the shots gained putting. Guys that you could look to for a little bit of regression. And in these short game categories, if you want to find some fades out there for round number 2, I don't hate fading these guys that gained like 4 strokes putting. So Denny McCarthy, though, I mentioned it earlier when we had the comment from Ross about him putting super well. Denny McCarthy might gain like 3 strokes putting again. Like that's just what Denny McCarthy does. He is the best putter bar none that we have out there in the world. However, a Cameron Young gaining 4 strokes putting, there's almost no chance in hell that he does that in 2 straight days. A Joe Highsmith, the Sam Stevens are not consistent putters. We know that Hideki Matsuyama is maybe the most bipolar putter that we have in PGA Tour history. All these guys, like a Keith Mitchell too, he's not a very good putter. Tony Finau, Colin Morikawa. It's crazy, by the way. Look at this list here. These are all slapdick putters. I mean, literally all of them from Shane Lowry and above, except for Denny McCarthy, are all slapdick putters that we would not think would be towards the top end of the shots gained putting list. So almost all of these guys that are towards the top here, I don't want to say that I'm fading every single one of them, but I might be. I truly might be fading every single player up there that gained like over 2 shots gained putting. I'm probably not playing Denny because he's in second. And then these other guys here, none of them have really impressive ball striking at all. Like Sam Stevens, he gained 1.2 strokes ball striking. Like he's the one I would maybe consider going out there and playing. Maybe a Colin Morikawa just because he is an elite tier stud. If anyone's going to go out there and have 2 nutted days in a row, it is going to be a guy like Colin as opposed to, a slappy down towards that 6 and 7K range. But with the added ownership you're going to get on all these guys that played well today, they could all be fades out there in my sort of exposure. So you can look at it around the green as well. These guys that got lucky in this category, not as likely to go out there and happen tomorrow. And, if they were struggling with their ball striking stats, it's going to be tough for me to want to go out there and play them. By the way, Nick Dunlap, he lost 6 strokes off the tee today. That feels like impossible. Like it feels like I could play a PGA Tour round and lose less than 6 strokes to the field. And I'm not even just saying that. I legitimately think I could lose less than 6 strokes to the field out there off the tee. Nick Dunlap needs to figure that out because the rest of his game wasn't terrible. I mean, the rest of his game, he actually gained 0.8 strokes to the field out there from fairway and in. If only Nick Dunlap could just play in a scramble or something like that, where he has somebody else hitting his tee shots. But these guys around the green also getting a little bit lucky could be potential fade candidates. And, when you flip it on its head and you take a look at some of the guys that struggled in these categories, if you can find players that were okay with the ball striking stats, those are the kind of guys I'm looking for a bounce back from as well. And, a Glover is always an or he could candidate. These guys that had horrendous days today, shooting like +2, +3, that kind of thing, they're never going to look good on paper. But you can always say or he could about those sort of guys. And I will take shots on players that had horrible days like that in a no-cut event like this if they're high upside players. Now, is Lucas Glover a super high upside player? Probably not. So he might not make my player pool. But on these guys like a Xander Schauffele, though, that lost 1.2 strokes around the green and were decent with the ball striking stats, like these are guys I consider adding to my player pool. A Chris Kirk over here, like he was okay with the ball striking, but lost over a stroke with the short game. Maybe he'd be a short game regression candidate that I'm looking at. And you could say about a Keegan Bradley, right? He's probably not going to lose like a stroke around the green all that often. A Tommy Fleetwood, he could be a lot better out there with the short game as well. Unfortunately for Tommy, though, he also wasn't that good with the irons. So ideally, we'd want to find somebody that's gaining in the 2 ball striking categories, but losing in both of the short game categories. You're not always going to find perfect fits for that sort of a player, but you'll find them occasionally. And even if they aren't perfect, you can still use that kind of idea to your advantage. So whether it's around the green or especially over there with the putter, the around the green regression I don't look for as much. It's mostly this putting regression that I'm looking for. We already talked about Berger. A Victor Hovland due to make a lot more putts. He was pretty solid from tee to green. You can see a Matty Fitzpatrick. He was also decent except for his off the tee play today, but lost nearly 3 strokes putting. A lot of these players are going to make my player pool. So Justin Rose, he's also a really good bent grass putter. And Jordan Spieth, he puts well on fast bent grass greens. So he's the kind of guy I might look to for a little bit of a bounce back there. So if you can find me guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes over here putting, but are normally good on this kind of surface, then, unlike the guys that gained a whole bunch of strokes that I'm avoiding, I want to get to those players that are due to go out there and regress positively. So that's how I use the shots gained metrics to my advantage. And because we don't have a massive weather edge out there, it makes it even more important to go out there and build a solid player pool. When we have a weather advantage to go out there and lean on, it sometimes makes our job a little bit easier to go out there and build a player pool because we can eliminate like half the field just based on the weather alone. And then you go out there and you just kind of pick your favorites out there from that given wave because we're going to have more choices with a wide open weather situation. mentioned, only the 2-hour spread from the first to last tee time, you're going to have to be more selective about the players that you're looking for. So I have ball striking poppers out there in my player pool. That's what I'll be adding out there to my exposure. Over there for my Patreon page and what I'm doing with my exposure, I'll be adding some high upside players. So those will be high birdie percentage guys, also good par 5 scorers, and then those short game regression candidates. And normally there are 4 things I'm looking for in a round 2 and 3 showdown slate, but because we don't have any course history around Philly Cricket Club, obviously, I'm not looking for course history guys out here for rounds 2 and 3. So it's just going to be those 3 categories for me out there in my exposure. And just because those are the 3 things that I'm looking for out there in players, it doesn't have to be what you're using. You can have your own process. You can adapt it your own way for what works best for you out there for your lineups and your success. You can look at, for example, the SHIPIT Nation Stone and try and find some round 2 players that just on Fridays tend to have a lot of success. That's not a bad way to go out there and add something to your process. You can use the approach series, the putting series that they have over there on the Stone. If you want to look at bombers, maybe you do that. Maybe you want to go after some weather guys because it's going to be rainy and a little bit windy tomorrow. You can make that a narrative that you're going after. Some of them might be tougher to pull off than others. Some of them you'll have just easy data to go and work off of, like driving distance, for example. But if you go after the weather narrative, that one is going to be a lot harder to go out there and narrow down. So whatever the case is, have a process for going out there and choosing the players that you're getting to. And don't just pick your names out of a hat. That is the one piece of advice. If you're going to take anything from this video, it's game theory, going out there and getting different to the field. The other thing is having an actual reason for going out there and clicking names. My biggest pet peeve is when I'm like getting questions or, I'm watching somebody build a lineup and trying to kind of give them some feedback out there for what I think. And they're just like, I'll pick this guy because he's low owned. Okay. First off, let's pump the brakes out there a little bit. There are a lot of guys that are going to be low owned out there for round 2 showdown. We've got 72 players to choose from. So low owned, we've got like 40 guys that fit that. Why else are you playing that player, right? It shouldn't just be low ownership that's getting you onto those sort of guys, because you're going to have plenty of those to comb through. So have a reason on top of that to go out there and add people to your player pool. That would be my main piece of advice out there for this kind of a slate. Where did we leave off? Let's see if there's any other questions. So with the rain coming in, do you think we have preferred lies? I would say so, Ross, especially with how much rain they're calling for. And because they're starting before the rain comes, there's a really good chance that they use those preferred lies. Not sure what about Berger. Yeah, Berger's putting is probably what you're referring to there. Crazy stuff that he lost over 3 strokes there. What's going on, Oliver? Said already got the VRBO in Dublin for the Steelers game. Am I making the trip? Yeah, I would love to go, man. I haven't booked anything quite yet. I know that my mom's going. Some of my aunts and uncles are going as well that are big Steeler fans. They invited me. I have to see whether I sneak my way over there or not. I haven't made the plans quite yet, though. It sounds like a lot of fun and enjoy it over there, dude. I can't think of a better way to watch a football game than in Dublin, getting a few pints out there, then walking to the game. That just sounds like absolute cinema, man. He said, thoughts on Poston, gained across the board except with the flat stick. That sounds like a pretty good JT Poston stat profile, because normally he's a really good putter and the rest of the game can be a little bit inconsistent. And like you said, you're spot on. He gained into the 3 tee to green categories, but lost just under a stroke over there with the putter. It's a good stat profile. The one thing I will say about JT Poston is because he shot -5 and he's there at T11, he's going to be a little bit more popular for round 2 showdown than what he was for main slate. And I'm not talking about mega chalk out there for round number 2, but as opposed to single digit ownership like you had for main slate, there's a chance that he creeps up closer to like 10%. So you can use Poston, especially with this kind of stat profile. Like if there's somebody over there at T11 that you're going to take with some inflated ownership, it is this kind of stat profile that's so favorable. But if you're looking for a 7K range guy to get you some differentiation, to try and perhaps make sure you're not duplicating yourself out there with other lineups, Poston isn't the best player for that scenario. Now, that's only just one specific scenario where he's not the best play. But if you're talking about single entries, you're talking about a lineup where you already have that differentiation squared away. Other guys, maybe a 6 and 8K range guy that you're using that's super low owned, then Poston makes a whole lot of sense in those kind of builds. So yeah, I do want to point out the ownership angle, and I'm speaking for my projections, what I do for my site. I will tell you that guys like Poston, I bump up with the projections on my site, because there's one thing I know out there about PGA DFS players is that they like playing guys that are in form, and they like guys that have really good tee to green stats. So, as much as I agree with that, we talk about that all the time here on the channel, it does have the unfortunate side effect with other people also being on those sort of plays. Would I say that Fitzy is in play? He started off slow, but hit some good approaches down the stretch. In play for sure. I really don't think there's anyone I would say is out of play for tomorrow, unless you're talking about the mega chalk towards the top. Like, some of that is an automatic cross off for me, but in terms of like your pivots towards the bottom, there's nothing that's too nasty for me to consider. Like, even a Nick Dunlop, we saw him have the bounce back round 2 over there at the Masters. We've seen crazier things happen than somebody like him getting there. So yeah, I wouldn't rule anyone out, and Fitzy for sure in play. Is there anywhere to see fairways hit? So yeah, Louis. So over here on the right, we have the fairway percentage here. This is on Bet the Number, but a lot of other websites, databases that have a live leaderboard are also going to have this on there. But even if you don't have access to one of those sort of sites, I'll show you how to find it over here on PGAtour.com. If you go over here to the leaderboard over here on the top left corner, you click on a player, then you go over here to the stats tab. Just click on round number 1, and you can see their driving accuracy. They're going to show it in percentage form first, and then the actual raw number afterwards. So hopefully that helps you out there, man. I know it's a little bit annoying to have to do it player by player. If you have access to a site like Bet the Number, which by the way, I'm a huge proponent for, there's somebody that I partner with myself over there on the content that I do on my channel. You're going to get that for every player, and it updates live over here at Bet the Number. That's what I really like about it. I'm somebody that like does a lot of prop stuff, like prop betting on like prize picks and underdogs. And it gives me a good way to track it live without having to like run down every single hole or anything like that. He hit 2 OB on the 1 hole for Dunlop. Jeez Louise, man. So that's like 3 or 4 shots gained right there. He wasn't that good outside of that hole either, huh? Dunlop's as bad off the tee as McCarthy is at putting. Agree with you on that one. He said it looks like a decent day to wear 2 gloves tomorrow. Yeah, Aaron Rye could be a duck's paradise out there with all that rain. Who knows? Thor Bjornsson 4-putt from 15 feet today was something. Yeah, I've seen it happen with tour players though, man. Like, it's usually a lack of concentration. People run putts by 4 or 5 feet all the time. The issue is when you run the next one by 4 feet. So when you get upset about it, like a John Rahm sometimes does, Thor Bjornsson tends to be a little bit fiery as well. You run it by, and then you run the next one by like 4 or 5 feet. I mean, it could just happen. Like, a 4 or 5 footer isn't going to be made every single time. So yeah, unfortunate, man, but they're tour pros. It happens to me all the time on the golf course. So I can't dog them too much if it happens to me. And he said, deep dive on Shane Lowry. Yeah, why not? So good old Shane Lowry today. He gains in every category but off the tee. Very consistent shots gained profile there. I would say kind of like Poston. It's not going to talk you off of him or anything like that. But, and there's 2 things I would say that would be working against Shane Lowry here, is he's T7, so he's going to get slightly inflated ownership, as some of the other guys at T11 are better, especially like T7 are better over there. A lot of your casual players, people that are newer to playing golf, will see somebody shooting -6 the one day and go, hey, if they shot -6 yesterday, then why wouldn't I use them the next day, right? If they shoot -6, they go out there and do that again, then I would be thrilled out there from that sort of play. That's not how golf works, though. Golf is an extremely variant sport. Scoring average was closer to -3. And, after somebody like Shane Lowry gains 1.5 strokes over there with the putter, it's going to be tough for him to back that up. So could he still shoot -6 by going out there and throwing a bunch of darts, gaining like 2 strokes approach? Yeah, obviously. Like, he could go out there and get it done that way. But is he going to go out there and carry himself with the putter 2 days in a row? I have a hard time thinking that is going to happen. So I'll just mention that I don't think he's my favorite play out there for tomorrow. I'm not going to be using a Shane Lowry out there in my lineups just because he's going to be average to above average ownership over there in that 8K range. And he's maybe due for some regression over there at the putter. And I don't mean the good regression that we were talking about with the guys that were losing like 2 to 3 strokes putting. I'm talking about the other way around, right? Where you go from gaining 1.5, 2 strokes putting to having an average to below average day. So that would be the concern there with the Shane Lowry. What went wrong with Harman? So let's look at it. No idea, to be frank with you. Brian Harman lost in every category but around the green. So he just played terrible golf today. Nothing much to say about it other than it's golf. It's a 4-letter word, and some guys are going to struggle from time to time. Thoughts on guys who are usually solid with approach that lost heavy in round number 1? Yeah, so it's just an 18-hole sample size. I wouldn't overreact to those ones that much. In fact, like if you're using the approach series over there on SHIPIT Nation, those kind of guys are going to be due for some regression using a tool like that. So I'm okay with that kind of thing as long as they weren't like spike putting on top of that, right? So like for example, Fleetwood, let's look at his shots gained metrics. He had gone out there, he lost 1.2 strokes approach, and then was maybe due for some short game regression. Like I actually like him out there for tomorrow. Let's look at Aubert though. Aubert lost strokes over there on approach and then gained in the other three categories. Like Aubert's going to get played tomorrow. He'll probably be above average ownership, I'd say, over there in that 9K range. Fleetwood though, and the shots gained profiles really aren't all that much different. Fleetwood might be below average ownership compared to some of the other guys around him. If you're going to take a chance on a guy that lost strokes on approach, I prefer it on the guys that are slightly lower owned, is what I would say there, Ross. I wouldn't do it on guys that are chalk. Rory can fall into that category. So guys that are normally good on approach that struggled. Yeah, a Rory, I don't know what his ownership's going to be. I mean, I still have to run my projections and whatnot. I have to think maybe closer to like 25, 30% tomorrow. I think he's going to come down a hair just because it's Showdown. When it's a more volatile format, a lot of your studs don't get played as much as what they are for main slate. And it makes sense when you have 4 full rounds. The cream is going to rise to the top a little bit more. So it's more of a priority to play guys like a Scotty or Rory when you have 4 rounds. So if let me call it 30%. It's just a guess. I still have to run my algorithm and whatnot. I still have to adjust based on sentiment out there to what I think where he's going to come in at. But 30% owned Rory McIlroy, like I don't know if he'd be the best person to take a shot on with these losing strokes on approach. Yeah, I'd prefer it with like those Fleetwoods of the world. And, Rory might be a little bit lower owned out there for Showdown tomorrow, but he's not going to be low owned by any means, right? That's why I had that hesitation out there with whether I thought he was a good player or not. He's still going to be like 30% owned, right? So even though it is a slight ownership discount compared to main slate, I'm not sure if it's like something I'm running to go out there and play. Fair enough, of course. Yeah, man. And I've got to say that with some guys just playing terrible sometimes, when you like accept that about players too, it really helps you with like finding bounce back candidates because those kind of guys sometimes they find it overnight. They'll go out there that have like a nutted round at like no ownership. And somebody like Brian Harman tomorrow, he was like decent ownership in main slate this week. People are playing him. I think he was like 8, maybe 9% owned, depending on the contest that you were entering. Tomorrow, he's like half the ownership of that. He's probably gonna be like 4 or 5% owned out there in my ownership projections. If anything, he's a better play now because it's an 18-hole sample size. You can find some regression candidates. And if you liked him for main slate, then why wouldn't you like him just after one bad round? So yeah, consider, and I'm not going to say to do it with Brian Harman specifically, but consider giving some of those players a break, especially only after just 18 holes. Of course, Louis, best of luck out there with all of your exposure and appreciate you hitting that like button. He said, what about Cam Young with a deep dive? Yeah, so we kind of looked at him before, but the issue is the putter. He gained 4 strokes putting today and then lost with the 2 ball striking categories. I have a hard time thinking that he's going to go out there and carry his game with 4 shots gained putting again. Now, could Cam Young go out there and still have a good round? Yes. It's just that if he's going to shoot like -4, -5 tomorrow, it's going to be because he turned around the ball striking stats. It's not going to be because he went out there and gained 4 strokes putting. And if he goes out there and he struggles with the ball striking again, and then he's even just a neutral over there with the putting, then he's shooting an even par round and losing like 3 strokes to the field. So that's the argument against a Cam Young. And I've got to say, this kind of stat profile, the only reason I would play somebody with this kind of stat profile, like losing all those shots tee to green, is if they were unowned. And because Cam Young's in T25, I don't think he's going to be unowned. Like I think he'll be at least average ownership over there in that 6K range, if not even slightly above average ownership because of how he played today. So unfortunately, not my favorite play, but he could get there. I always like to throw out that asterisk because if he gains the ball striking back, you never know. Let's talk about some contests for tomorrow. So if you have any player deep dives, we'll go back to those after we go through some strategy here together. But in terms of the contests for tomorrow, they're pretty shitty. They're actually smaller than what we're used to seeing. Now, I think partially because of the weather, they didn't want to go out there and post a whole bunch of contests. But like even the 555 is smaller than normal. but it is less top heavy than normal. So, maybe it's a little bit of a double-edged sword there, a little bit of sweet and sour, I guess, out there with this kind of setup, because it is smaller. You're not going to have as big of first place prizes, but some of these payout structures are a little bit flatter than what they otherwise would be. This $250 4max is not an example of one of those, though. This is still a third to first place, so still extremely top heavy compared to some of the others. But the long drive, so the big $100 single entry, that is 15% to first place. That is a pretty good payout structure for a single entry. The big $5 GPP is a fifth over there to first place. So it's a top heavy, but it's not as bad as it could be, right? It's not 25, 30% out there to first place. This kind of 20% number that you have right there is at least playable enough for me out there in my exposure. So I'll probably have 50 lineups in this $5. I'll enter this $100 long drive as well. You've got the $5 single entries down here, $33 single entries, $12 albatrosses that I like to go out there and enter. And then you even have this $44. Let me see if they even have it posted. They might not over there for tomorrow. The $44 one I saw was, this one right here, this sand trap. Wait, what am I looking at here? Am I looking at the wrong contest? What was that there? So this is the normal GPP. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong one there. The big $25 for tomorrow is also a 141 max entry. So I don't know why they're starting with this 141 stuff. It's normally always a 150 max, but this is also only a fifth over there to first place. So this sand trap is a lot smaller entry-wise than what we're used to seeing. That's why it has such a smaller prize pool, right? Normally it's like closer to like 200 grand that we have out here in this sort of contest. But what it does give us is the slightly better payout structure for that top 5, top 10. So even this $25 GPP, I think is pretty playable. But let me see if they have the $10 18 max. It's a pipe dream that they would post it, but you never know, I guess. So yeah, I don't see the $10 18 max posted quite yet. So if you're somebody that's just playing this as a hobby, right, trying to go out there, get some action in for round number 2, stick to these sort of contests like this, 4K dog leg that you have here, where it's a 10% out there to first place, a flat payout structure after that. Where's the $12 albatross? Was that one further down? So yeah, here's the $12 albatross I was talking about. Smaller contests of what we're used to seeing, but when it's close to that 10% that you're getting out there to first place, the rest of the payouts out there for the top 5, top 10 are going to be respectful enough that you're at least still winning something if you go out there and have yourself a good lineup. So check out those sort of builds if you're looking to go out there and find the best payout structures. If you want to go out there and fully degen just one of the lottos, like this big $5 or $25, they've got those posted as well. Just the payouts out there for first place maybe aren't going to be as big as what you're used to seeing. In terms of putting together lineups, rounds 2 and 3 showdown all comes down to leverage, especially when we don't have a weather edge like we have for tomorrow, just because of the weather situation and the tee time situation that we have at hand. It's going to be making sure that we have enough leverage in our builds. And it doesn't mean that you have to fade all of the chalk. Like you can have somebody with some ownership sneaking into lineups in different places, but I wouldn't get too crazy when it comes to some of that chalk. So I'm going to throw in a JT there who I liked the shots gain metrics on a JT, right? If you guys remember with him before, he had been gaining with the ball striking, but lost strokes over there with the putter. So, he was one of those guys towards the top 5 of the ball striking that we could go out there and play. Unfortunately, though, he's going to be chalk. Like I think he's going to be probably about 20% owned out there in GPPs tomorrow. So let's start with somebody that has some ownership, but he's maybe not the 35% Rory McIlroy. Second minute, I'm going to throw in a Russell Henley, who's also due to go out there and make a few more putts. If, by the way, if you don't believe me with that, just go hole by hole and follow Russell Henley. He missed just so many birdie putts today. It was disgusting. And I think he'll be maybe average to slightly below. Actually, yeah, probably about average ownership, I'd say, over there at T11. So we're starting with a pretty chalky 1-2 here, but 2 guys that really fit the bill when it comes to the shots gain metrics. We have 4 other spots to get different. And whether this is in the large field GPP or over there in a single entry or smaller field contest, you could get away with this kind of a start. But depending on how big the contest that you're entering is, that's where you have to figure out how much leverage you need. Because if this was a cash lineup, for example, we don't care about leverage at all. Go out there and play all the best plays. If you're playing in a double up or a 50-50, that kind of thing. If you're playing in a single entry against just a couple hundred people, like 150, like you have in that albatross that we just went through, then maybe you only need like 1 or 2 pivots out there in your lineup. But if you're playing in the big $25 or $5 GPP, which maybe isn't as big over there for tomorrow, but big enough to where you still have to have leverage out there in your lineups, you probably want at least 2 pivots out there in your lineups if not 3 of your last 4 players here. So for the sake of making this a little bit more interesting going through the lineup construction, let's assume we're entering this for the big $25 or $5 GPP, where we're actually entering against 5,000 to 6,000 other people. So for our next man in, we have to kind of start to think about the ownership. We might, and I'll stress might, be able to get away with playing somebody that has some ownership for our last 4 spots. But most of the plays we're getting to here have to be pretty low owned. So I'm going to throw in a Brian Harman as a potential bounce back. Do I think he's my favorite play for tomorrow? Am I even sure whether he's going to be in my player pool or not? No, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be on Brian Harman. A lot of that is going to come down to where his ownership comes in. But compared to some of the other guys around him at that portion of the board, he's going to be average to below averagely owned. So maybe it's a Harman, maybe it's a Justin Rose you could go out there and throw in. I kind of really like the putting regression for Rose. He's usually a much, much better putter on these fast bent grass greens. So maybe let's go with Rose instead of going with Harman there, but also a little bit lower owned than some of the other guys around him because he's there at T65. Next man in, let's also think about the ownership. So like you'd really want to avoid guys like Keith Mitchell here at -9. He's going to be extremely popular. Whereas if we go up here to a Wyndham Clark, who by the way, the shots gained metrics for the approach play with Clark were terrible today. Lost 3 strokes in that category, but I won't completely condemn somebody just based on how they played today if there's another reason for getting to them. And with a Wyndham Clark, the clear reasoning for why you'd ever want to play Wyndham Clark out there in Showdown is that he's one of the highest birdie percentage players that you have on the PGA Tour. Last year was top 5 in birdie or better percentage. He's a great par 5 scorer, and he's a really good putter when he goes out there and gets the speed for the greens. And today that was not the case. You can see over here, he lost strokes over there on the greens. But even if tomorrow he's a neutral over there on approach, and then we get a spike round with the putter, which happens quite often for Wyndham Clark because he is one of the best putters that we have out there on the PGA Tour, then watch out. It could be a nuclear low round for him. And I'm not going to do this with just anyone. Like I said, the shots gained approach is a huge red flag out there on players, but I will look the other way on guys when they're so high upside and they're so low owned is what you have there with a Wyndham Clark. So let's throw him in there at $7,800. You could even use a Robert McIntyre for a little bit of leverage. He was closer to $8,000 for main slate, now a little bit cheaper. And because he didn't play that well, I don't think he's going to get all that kind of steam. And then even with their last man in here, I mentioned with one of your last 4 spots, you can still get away with taking some ownership. Even if you wanted to take a chalkier guy like an Eric Cole, a Sam Stevens there, and spend all of your salary, even a Tony Finau over there at $7,200, any of these guys that are probably closer to 7 to 10% ownership, you could probably get away with it even in that $525 GPP because of these ownership pivots that we were intentional about making, forcing in players that were sub 10% owned. Now, if we had been a little bit more lenient with our ownership before, so maybe we had played a Novak, who I think is a good play, by the way, out there for tomorrow, but he's a little bit higher owned. What you have with somebody like a Justin Rose, your last man in here on that $5 or that $25 GPP, you might not want to take a piece of chalk. Now, we're also having to go $200 cheaper, right? So you're not going to have the same guys at $7,200. They were all getting that ownership. But like even a Grazerman or an Eric Van Rooyen or a Rasmus Højgaard here, they're going to be a little bit more popular than some of the other guys around them. In those bigger contests, you might have to think twice before going out there and playing that kind of chalky player. So that's where the lineup construction comes in, right? It's not who you play, and it's how you play them that matters out there in your GPPs. And it's just a balancing act, depending on the contest that you're entering. If you're in a cash contest, you're not really balancing anything. If you're in a single entry, you're kind of balancing that ownership, right? Maybe going like a 4-2, that kind of thing. 4 decently owned guys, 2 pivots in that kind of build. GPPs, though, you might want to extend that out there to a 3-3, where it's like at most 3 guys that are getting some ownership, and then 3 guys that are potentially being used as pivots out there in those builds. So that's it out there for the round 2 live stream, though, guys. That's it for everything I needed to go over. I will see if there's any last second questions down there in the chat. So if there is anything you're curious on, go ahead and hit me right now down there in the chat before we hop out of here. But best of luck with everything that you guys are going with, whether it's over there with your GPP exposure, up to see your names towards the top of some of those GPPs. Hopefully your main slate exposure can go out there and rise towards the top over the next few days as well. And of course, out there for all the prop and betting stuff over over here for round number 2. Make sure to check out my live stream a little bit later on tonight over there on my YouTube channel. So that'll be over there on GSLukeDFS. The start time for that is going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And today we had an 80% clip on the 20 props that we entered. So it was one of the better days of the year when it came to our prop exposure. And I like these new golf courses, if you can't tell. Like, I'm a huge golf course nerd. I'm somebody that prides myself in really being able to break down conditions and get a good idea of what to expect ahead of time. And on a day like this where the sports books have no idea what to expect, it's the day to go out there and take advantage. So, some people on a day like this might be a little bit hesitant because they don't know what to expect. But if you see an edge out there, right, you've got to lean into it as much as humanly possible. So I'm not sure what they're going to do with the pricing out there for round 2 quite yet. I would assume that they're going to make it more favorable, right? They're going to push those strokes lines down. They're probably going to bump up some of those birdie lines too. But maybe that makes some value on the fades then, right? If they overdo it over there with those boards. So for all the prop stuff, make sure to check out my live stream for all that a little bit later on. And of course, guys, for all the SHIPIT Nation content, make sure to check out their website out there for the stone for tomorrow. That's going to have the approach series, the putting series that I was hinting at before. Also that round two historical that you can use for building your player pool. And make sure to check out my Patreon page for all the projections that I'm doing. So SHIPIT Nation, great tools out there themselves, a great community for helping you guys learn in DFS. And of course, I run my own website where I do a lot of the same. So I would highly recommend that you join my site also over there at SHIPIT Nation. Get all the possible tools that you can out there for your next day's process, because I run my own projections. You can use those for some perspective, my own ownership. You can use the SHIPIT Nation Stone. It's got so much on there. I mean, it's got stuff that I don't cover on there for sure, right? You can go out there and use for your process. And then they've got their projections that you can add for even more further perspective on top of that. So I can't recommend enough joining both sites. SHIPIT Nation, you can find down there in the description. And then my Patreon page is also GSLukeDFS. So I can find that on my Twitter bio. You can find it on any of the descriptions of the videos that I post over there at YouTube. On there, I've got my projections, my player pool, my modeling out there for Showdown stuff. You've probably seen it before, right, over here on these YouTube videos in the past. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with everything that you guys are going with. And let me see if there's any last-second questions we need to go through. Let's see. Of course, Doug, best of luck with your stuff. Let's do a little deep dive on Grazerman. So I like the call there on Grazerman. He somebody I was looking to for a little bit of a high upside play this week. Shots gained wise, though, he was close to average in all 4 categories. Slightly positive off the tee, slightly negative out there with the approach play. And then, losing around the green, but gaining with the putter. This shots gained profile doesn't really tell us very much. But what I will say is that this green regulation number, him hitting 83% of the greens, shows that he was in pretty decent control of his game. And you can see over here, he must have hit a wild drive at 7 because he missed the fairway and the green there. 17, the same thing. That was another one of his bogey holes, missed the fairway and the green. If he can clean up the off the tee a little bit tomorrow, maybe, he's long off the tee. So the fact that he was only slightly positive in that category, right, tells me that he could have been a little bit more accurate with some of those drives. If he cleans that up, this looks like a really good stat profile. And you might not notice that at first because he is so close to neutral across all 4 categories, but it was really just 2 holes that held him back from greatness. He put up 5 birdies. That was about the field average today. And that was despite only being a slightly above average putter. So imagine if he has his typical self. He's one of the best bent grass putters that we have in this entire field. He gains about a stroke per round out there on bent grass for his field average, for his career average, I should say, actually. Then he'd be in an even better spot than what you had for round number 1. So yeah, Max Grazerman, like a 5 out of 10 on paper, but could be a little bit better. You said, great show. Good luck tomorrow. Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate the kind words there, and best of luck yourself with everything. But that's all I've got, guys. Let's go out there and smash our exposure out there for round number 2. And I'll see you guys a little bit later on this evening for the prop and betting live stream over there on my channel.